We'll call to order the second meeting of the local government for the 2023 interim. Secretary, will you call the roll?
Senator Byrd, Senator Elkins, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Senator Nemus,
Present.
Senator Storm,
Here.
Senator Thayer,
Here.
Senator Wheeler, Senator Williams, Representative Bentley, Representative Bowling, Representative Bray, Representative Brown, Representative Chester Burton, Representative Dixon, Representative Doan,
Present.
Representative Frazier Gordon,
Yes.
Representative Freeland, Representative Imes,
Here.
Representative Justice, Representative Lockett,
Here.
Representative Meredith, Representative Proctor, Representative Raymer, Representative Reed, Representative Stalker, Representative Stevenson, Representative Thomas,
Present.
Senator Mills,
Here.
Representative Bridges.
Here. Looks like we're got a quorum and duly constituted to do business. But before we get started, a few housekeeping measures. First, does any of our members have a guest they'd like to introduce? Not seeing that. We have one other item that's not listed on the agenda, but we would like to recognize one of the LRC staff that's been with us for 36 years. And we're very proud of that, and saddened that he's getting ready to retire. But Joe, if you don't mind, Joe Pasinski, if you'll stand up, he's just an amazing guy. I'm sure you've got a lot of stories. If you think about if these walls could talk, we'll have to keep him locked down so he don't tell all the secrets. But Joe, it's been an honor to serve with you my 5 years here in the House, and I would really like to turn the floor over to you if you'd like to say a few words.
The only thing I can say is it's a wonderful time, and the legislature has grown immensely, not because I've been here 36 years, but in the 36 years that I've walked the halls, it's wonderful to see what you all have become.
Well, we appreciate your years of service. He is a dedicated employee, and honestly, it's the LRC staff that holds this place together. They're the glue, and we get the privilege of serving with them in and out for a few years during our terms, but they're the ones that really put in the hours. Co-Chair Mills, would you like to say anything?
No, I'd just like to thank Joe. I know he's drafted a lot of bills for me, and he's been very good to work with. So thank you so much, and best of luck in your retirement.
Joe, we do have a citation we'd like to give to you, and
It's not speeding.
if you would. With that, we do have a hectic schedule. It is packed full. We've got, I'll give the speakers the minutes they have if they want to set a timer on their phone. But first up is the Property Tax Overview, Kentucky Department of Revenue. Melissa Klink, if you don't mind to come to the table and introduce yourself. And you got 15 minutes. This started 2 minutes ago. You may need to pull that up closer.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, and you do have a PowerPoint if you'd like it.
Yes, I do.
You'll control it on that
Over
laptop right there.
Here. Okay. I think Mark was going to bring it up. I'm Melissa Klink. I'm director of the Division of Local Support under the Office of Property Valuation in the Department of Revenue. And Tom Crawford would normally be here to do this presentation, but he's on vacation this week, so I get the pleasure of coming and doing this. First off, we'd like to thank you all for inviting us to provide you with the information on the overview of the property tax collections and how those affect the local governments. Perfect. Thank you. All right. As you all are aware the property tax calendar is mandated by statutes, and this is so that we can provide continuity of service to all local governments. And we have divided the property tax calendar into 3 sections so that you can see how the PVAs, clerks, and sheriffs play a role in the collection process. So this section here is all the PVA's duties. The PVA is their primary role is to assess all property equitably in their county. A couple of dates I would like to point out is they do submit a first recap to us, the Department of Revenue, on the first Monday in April. And this, we take this, we calculate all the numbers, and then we provide them with a approval letter saying that they have met the level of assessment for their county. And at that point, they begin the tax calendar. Then we also receive the final recap after they've had their inspection period, and if they deal with any appeals, they submit a final recap to us, and this is their total numbers, and this is what we certify them on. And once they are certified, we send this information to DLG, and that's where the tax rate setting process begins. So this is the tax calendar for the sheriffs. These are all the duties that the sheriff is responsible for. The sheriff is the collector of the taxes. So they collect all the taxes on personal property, real property, and everything. Most counties start collecting October 1st. Some begin in November. Either one of those is fine. That keeps them on the tax calendar. If they begin on October 1st, then property owners are allowed to pay at the 2% discount until November 1st. And that's by statute. I know it seems a little weird. Most of the dates are the 1st to the 30th or 31st, but if they do start on October 1st, they have until November 1st to pay it at the discounted price. And then finally, we get to the clerk's duties. And basically on April 15th, all the bills are turned over from the sheriff to the clerk. And from there, the clerk handles all of the delinquent bills and the certificates of delinquency. They have a lot of duties that fall in that. They have to advertise the delinquent tax bills. They have to register third parties, and they also have to conduct the tax sales. And the tax sales are held between July 14th and August 28th. And then this is just, I mentioned the recaps that are submitted to us by the PVA. This is an example of that. This is the front page of the recap, and basically it summarizes all the assessments that they've done. The column 1 is their final numbers from their first recap. Column 2 are any increases that they've made since their first recap. Column 3 is any decreases that they've happened to make during that time. And then column 4 is actually from any appeals that were filed. If any appeals were filed by property tax owners, the PVA is required to submit the property owner's value that they're claiming on their appeal. And then once the appeal process is finished, then they can update that number. But that's how they are required to submit the information. And then on the back page is a record of their homestead exemptions, any additions and deletions that they have, and so forth. And then we also wanted to show that the school districts, if a county has only one school district, then they're just required to send us that grand total sheet. If they happen to have more than one school district, they have to submit a recap on each school district. And those school districts all have to add up to the grand total. So there's just an example of Bourbon County has Bourbon County schools as well as Paris City schools. Then this is a copy of the certification that we calculate and send out, and this goes to all the local officials, the county clerks, the PVAs, the sheriffs, county attorneys, judge executive. Everybody in the county gets a copy of this certification. And sorry, make sure I'm not leaving anything out. Yeah. Then the next sheet we send. This is the actual sheet that we send to local government. This also includes the public service numbers that are not necessarily included on the county because they don't necessarily need that information, but the local government does. And so this is the sheet that local government receives. And once they receive this from us, then they begin the tax rate setting process. And on the same token, we send a certification to the Department of Education once we've certified a county. And they get us for each school in that county, they get a certification with all the numbers that they need to start setting tax rates for schools. Then, like I said, there's one for just an example of the county and the independent school certification. And then we get to local collections, and this is the local collections for all counties, all local governments that receive money from property taxes. You can kind of look at that, hopefully, yourselves, because it's kind of small. But basically, the grand total is $3.2 billion that are given to local officials from property tax. And that is pretty much it. Unless you all have questions.
Do we have any questions? Senator Harper Angel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the tax appeals boards.
Yes, ma'am.
Historically, they've been behind, and while those processes are going on, the property owner only pays taxes on their opinion of value.
Correct.
Can you update the committee on that backlog and maybe how long it takes to complete the process?
It can, especially with personal property like the Walgreens and things like that. Those can take a lot of time. With real estate, usually they're settled at the County Board of Appeals, which is let's go back to that date. There we go. So those begin after that inspection period, and the property tax usually gets handled. The real property tax usually gets handled there. Very rarely does it go further than the local board. Now, some of your personal property, I don't know exactly how long, but some of the bigger businesses can take a while because they'll actually take it to the circuit court level. But as far as property tax owners and their real property, it's handled pretty quickly. But I can get back to you a better answer once. I can talk to Tom about that and get a better answer on that. But that's all I've got right now.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm sure Tom will know.
Yes, I'm sure he will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator McDaniel.
Thank you, and always appreciate Senator Harper Angel with her background and understanding
Yes.
of this issue very much. We had something come up the other year about doing aerial assessments, and I simply don't remember where we left that subject exactly.
I think they did say that it was okay for the PVAs to utilize that aerial technology to find differences. If they, a lot of times they can fly over and they can there's a layover, and they can see where additions to homes have been made and things like that, so that they know they need to go out and physically see that house and reassess it. So I believe that's where they left that, was that they could use it for that kind of information.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? With that, we appreciate it.
Thank
you did
you.
excellent on
Thank
the
you.
timing.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Horde, Insurance Program Manager, Department of Insurance. If you will come to the table and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is John Horde. I am with the Kentucky Department of Insurance. I'm the Local Government Premium Tax Program Manager. And first, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to speak this morning, and I look forward to being able to assist you with anything that I may now or in the future. Local Government Premium Tax is a tax that is imposed and collected at the local level. It is a fee and tax upon insurance companies for the privilege of engaging in insurance within that local jurisdiction. The local government premium tax may be a pass-through tax. It is a tax on insurance companies or surplus lines brokers. However, they may pass that through to policyholders if they wish to. Local government premium taxes are enacted at the local level. They're done by local ordinance. The local jurisdictions set the rate. They may, if they wish, include additional exclusions to their local government premium tax. And again, that is done by local ordinance, whether through the city or a county. Taxes are based on fiscal year. We just started fiscal year 23-24 on July 1. All new local government premium taxes or amended taxes must be submitted to the Department of Insurance within 100 days of July 1st. 85 days prior to July 1st, the Department of Insurance will post all resources that are required. That includes the new tax schedule. We post a bulletin annually, tax code description resources, the payee and addresses resource, which will assist with being able to make sure that the taxes are remitted to the appropriate place. Taxes are imposed on risk located within a local government. One of the things we need to ensure when looking at the local government premium tax is when they're determining which jurisdiction it should go to, whether that risk location is within a city limits, and if not, the correct county that risk location is in. A physical address is required when determining the local government premium tax. You may not use a zip code. A risk location may have a mailing address. Just to use an example of Scott County, they may have a Georgetown mailing address, however, not be physically located within the city limits of Georgetown. Therefore, they would not be subject to the City of Georgetown tax. So it's imperative that insurance companies and surplus lines brokers are utilizing what we call a verified risk location vendor. By statute, if an insurance company has more than 2,000 locations in the previous calendar year, they're required to use one of our vendors. If an insurance company has less than that, they may use an alternative method. One of those is the Kentucky Incorporated Cities Map. That is a tool that is Commonwealth of Office Technology puts together. It works somewhat like a Google Earth. You can put an address in. It will tell you whether or not it is located within the city limits or not. And if not, then you can look at the county that the risk location was in. Again, that's really one of the most important and imperative issues when dealing with local government premium tax is ensuring that location is or is not within a city limits. Quarterly payments of the taxes are required to be remitted within 30 days of the end of the quarter that the premium was collected in. Those local government premium taxes are remitted directly to the jurisdictions. So it's collected during that calendar quarter. At the end of the quarter, a insurance company or surplus lines broker will then remit that by check to the appropriate jurisdictions. They'll have accompanying cover letters that go with it, document forms. One is an LGT 141 form. Basically, it's a demographic form to detail who the insurance company was, who the broker was, and it's a breakdown across different lines of business of how much premium was collected and how much local government premium tax was collected in that quarter. And that's remitted again directly to the city or the county. There is an LGT 142 form. What that is in situations, currently there are 9 counties that have what are determined to be designated as tax code A jurisdictions. This is the case when a city and a county both have local government premium tax and impose it. In this situation, the city has a lower tax than the county. So if your risk location is within a city, and for an example, say the city has a 5% and the county has a 10%, the city is going to get 5%, and that 5% to the city is going to be a credit towards the county. So the county will not get its 10%, it will only get 5%. Again, that's a tax code A jurisdiction, and that happens in 9 counties currently. with certain cities within that county. Excuse me. We do also have some grandfathered jurisdictions, which are tax code B. There are 3 counties and 4 cities which that currently and will only be going forward. Those were jurisdictions that were prior to House Bill 524 in 1990. So in those situations, the city will receive its entire local government premium tax, and the county will receive its entire local government premium tax. At the end of the year, so again, the Department of Insurance does not participate in the quarterly collecting or remitting of the tax. That is done directly to each jurisdiction. However, at the end of each year, all insurance companies and surplus lines brokers are required to file a annual reconciliation LGT 140 form. And that is basically a summation of all local government premium taxes collected in the previous calendar year. And that is reported to the Department of Insurance online through e-services. It is due prior to March 31st every year. And a hard copy paper, or a paper hard copy must be filed and mailed to each jurisdiction. So they'll file electronically with the Department of Insurance, and then a hard copy paper will be sent to each of the jurisdictions. That is basically a very quick overview of the local government premium tax and how the Department of Insurance assists with navigating both the insurance, assisting with the insurance companies and also surplus lines brokers and making sure that it is correctly collected and remitted. And I'm open to any questions or that I may assist with. Thank you.
I don't see any questions, but I do have one. On the tax collection method, is that charged on premiums that are collected or premiums due? Like some people choose to pay it monthly, biannually, whatever. When, I just sort of a question to see if you have to do credit and back and forth, or whether it's collected as they pay on the amount paid.
It is based on actual premium collected in that calendar quarter.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other? With that, we appreciate it. Before we call the next presenter up, we do need to get a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting. I have a motion and a second. With that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We'll get that out of the way. I know that we have other committee meetings starting at 9:30. We'll have some of the members filtering in and out. So if you see a lot of movement, there's a lot going on today. So just to give you that update. Next up, we have Sean Orm, the Executive Advisor for the Department of Insurance. No, I'm sorry. They were all together. Abigail, no. Okay, Scott Hall and Larry Klein. Please forgive me. We've got a lot of names on this list with the occupational license taxes and the Kentucky Occupational License Tax Association. And you've got between 10 and 15 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Bridges and Mills. My name is, and members of the committee, my name is Larry Klein. I'm one of the founding members and past president of the Kentucky Occupational License Association. We originated in 2001 in an effort to try to create an education network, training network for city, county, and school district tax administrators across the state. And our organization also helped to create some new legislation in 04, 05, and 06 that became law. We helped Representative Carolyn Belcher, then of Bath County, that was made the occupational tax more business friendly. So at the request of the COLA Board of Directors, Scott and I are here to speak with you today about occupational license tax. And we're honored to do so, and COLA appreciates the opportunity to present this information and inform the committee on the members on the scope and significance of occupational tax to cities and counties and school districts. When you start talking taxes, people usually, their eyes gloss over, but this occupational tax is the lifeblood of local governments in Kentucky. I guarantee you, far surpassing property tax. It's how we pay for essential services: police, fire, ambulance, roads. We only have 15 minutes a day. We could speak to you for hours on this, but you'd probably fall asleep by then, and so would we. And understand that COLA is a small organization, and as such, we don't have all the data that was requested, but a lot of this can be gleaned from the Secretary of State website. We're only going to scratch the surface today. So what we're going to give you today is just kind of a high-level overview. Information provided by the Kentucky League of Cities will tell you that occupational license tax is the #1 revenue source for cities. Per the Kentucky Association of Counties, it's a #1 revenue source for counties. So basically, the occupational license tax is kind of an umbrella term. Either a net profit or gross receipts tax is paid by the business. The payroll tax is paid by the employee. The employee pays on gross wages. The business can pay based on net profit or gross receipts, whatever the city or county deems is the basis for business taxation. The employee pays this through a payroll withholding from their employer. And again, as I said, it's on the gross wages of the employee. So there are some, generally each city and county and school district collects their own occupational tax, but there are some centralized collection agencies in the state. There are 4 dual tax jurisdictions, and there are several multi-tax jurisdictions. You can see I work part-time as part-time tax compliance officer in the city of Crestview Hills, which is in Kenton County, and Kenton County has been collecting our occupational tax since the 1990s. I worked for Kent County from 1988 to 1998 as their licensed inspector, and helped develop this consolidated system. Every city in Kent County, 15 of them, with the exception of Covington, the largest city, is in that multi-jurisdiction tax system. I did that job for 10 years before I collecting taxes. Thought I'd move on to something easier, being a city manager, but I think collecting taxes was simpler and easier. But anyway, so all these jurisdictions have over the years mutually agreed that it's in their best interest to kind of combine collections for ease of administration and where it benefits the business community rather than getting multiple forms from multiple cities within the county. Let's do it all on one form. So as you can see, this is a brief slide on City of Crestview Hills statistics. We're a small city, 3,200 people, but that can be a little misleading. We actually serve a population at least 3 to 4 times that number. We have an office park, we have a university, we have the Crestview Hills Town Center, we have 2 interstate highways in our city, I-275, and I believe I-75. So we have a population, daytime population that we serve with police, fire, and ambulance and roads that far exceeds that number. And how we pay for that is with the occupational tax. As you can see, we have a small budget, $4.4 million. The payroll tax and gross receipts tax is 65, almost 66% of our total revenue of our city. By reference, property tax is only 18%. But of that 65.82%, employees pay 54% of total budget revenue, and businesses pay about 11%. Our payroll tax rate is 1.15% with a FICA cap. Once you hit that, you stop paying our payroll tax. Our gross receipts tax on businesses is 75 cents per thousand, but once you hit a $40,000 tax liability, that's the cap. As I said before, we're one of 15 cities in the Kent County multi-tax jurisdiction system, and we've been doing that for about 25 years, and all that is by mutual agreement. And that system works well because it allows local governments to maintain control of their tax rates and remain business friendly to our businesses. I'll turn this over now to Scott Hall, Executive Director of Georgetown Scott County Revenue Commission.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Chairman Mills and Bridges and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us to speak. As Larry said, my name is Scott Hall. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgetown Scott County Revenue Commission and a past president of COLA. I've been administering occupational license tax on behalf of local governments in the Commonwealth for 15 years. The first 8 years I served as manager of the audit division at the Louisville Metro Revenue Commission. In the past 7 years, I've served as the Executive Director of the Georgetown Scott County Revenue Commission. The agency that I lead collects occupational license tax on the reported net profits of businesses with business activity in Scott County and the gross wages of employees working in Scott County. Payroll taxes are collected via employers or their payroll providers who withhold the tax from their employees' gross wages and remit it to the Revenue Commission. We administer these two taxes, net profit and payroll, for 3 different taxing jurisdictions: the City of Georgetown, the Scott County Fiscal Court, and the Scott County Board of Education. The Revenue Commission Board of Commissioners consists of the Mayor of Georgetown, the Scott County Judge Executive, and the Superintendent of Scott County Schools. The city and county tax rates on net profits and gross wages are 1% per jurisdiction, and the school board tax rate on net profits and gross wages is 0.5%. There are no offsets. Tax revenue disbursements are issued by the Revenue Commission to the 3 jurisdictions twice monthly. The Revenue Commission model provides the benefits of the economies of scale, locally controlled centralized collection for the convenience of the 3 taxing jurisdictions as well as the taxpayers and the tax professionals in our community, while maintaining 100% local control of this vital source of revenue to meet the service needs of the citizens we serve. Every year we have an independent external audit of our financials. Every year, one of the metrics from the audit that I present to my commissioners is the Georgetown Scott County Revenue Commission return on investment. For the last audited year that I have stats on, fiscal year end 6/30/2022, our total revenue collections for the year were $48.4 million. The Revenue Commission's all-in expenses are $825,000. That's a 98.3% return on investment. For every $1 in tax revenue collected, 1.7 cents goes to the total Revenue Commission operations. And remember, since this is a jointly funded agency, the city only pays 40% of that, the county pays 40% of those expenses, and the school board pays 20%, which means for every dollar collected, the city's paying slightly less than 7/10 of 1 penny, the county's paying slightly less than 7/10 of 1 penny, and the school board is paying slightly more than 3/10 of 1 penny. The Georgetown Scott County Revenue Commission has a very lean, effective, and efficient tax administration operation. In the 7 years as an executive director, we have collected $312.3 million in occupational license tax revenue for the city, county, and school board. That's the revenue impact of occupational license tax in just one community in the Commonwealth, $312.3 million. I won't go through all these details, other to show you that each of these collection years we've seen increases. In some years, the last 3 years, multi-million-dollar increases in our collections. One anomaly is fiscal year 2020 due to COVID. The tax year filing deadline of April 15th was moved to July. So those revenues which normally would have occurred in the 2020 fiscal year did not occur till the 2021. So the 41.2 million number is artificially low, and the 2021 number is a little artificially high. Although it just ended 24 days ago, the fiscal year that just ended June 30th, we have collected $53.5 million. That is the largest single-year collections in the 18-and-a-half-year history of the Revenue Commission. That is a $5.1 million increase over the prior year, and it's the first time we've ever exceeded $50 million. So there is a lot of growth in our community as well. For some perspective, in the last 7 years, our average annual collections are $44.61 million. The prior 12.5 years were 32.2. So our average annual collections are running $12.41 million higher. The payroll tax to net profit ratio, this is adjusted for financial inducement payments. For fiscal year 2022, that was 88.12, which means 88% of the occupational license tax revenue collected was from payroll tax. That number is $42.6 million. The net profit tax was 12%. 12% is $5.8 million. So the employees who have this tax withheld from their paycheck are paying 88% of the occupational license tax, and the businesses that operate in our jurisdiction are paying 12%. I mentioned growth earlier just due to the collections. We've also seen in fiscal year 2022, 1,099 new business accounts opened in Scott County. That's the largest number of business accounts we have registered in the 18-and-a-half-year history of the Revenue Commission. Our prior 5-year average is 870 new accounts opened every single year, which is also a respectable number. Any questions?
Senator Thayer has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, welcome
Thank
to
you, sir.
Frankfurt.
Thank you, Senator.
Scott is a constituent of mine. We like him so much we named a whole county after him. Thank you. I'll be here all morning. The Revenue Commission that Scott talks about was, and its ability to collect taxes for 3 entities, was created by a bill I sponsored during my freshman term in the Senate in 2004. Back then, people had to go make 3 stops or mail 3 envelopes to the courthouse, the city hall, and the school board. And that was one of the first bills I got passed. So there's a lesson here, folks. Even freshman legislators can make a difference. It can happen. That was interesting times. Democrats controlled the House. Representative Reggie Meeks lit my bill up with a Senate committee substitute that nearly tanked the bill. We barely got it past the House, and then we concurred with the Senate because we figured it was very rare for a Republican bill to get through the House back then. How times have changed. Senator Elkins, things are very, very different now. So they are. Scott, it's great to hear that the collections are going well, but I have a really big concern, as do a lot of homeowners in Scott County, about the huge increases in assessed value by our PVA, which, unless the fiscal court takes action, is going to result in a massive tax increase for anyone who owns property in Scott County. I have spoken to my good friend, the judge executive, and several members of the fiscal court and urged their consideration. I know that a lot of the growth we're seeing is because of the population growth and the number of businesses. Scott County is the fastest growing county in Kentucky, although I think the senator from Bullitt, who's sitting right in front of me, they may say that they're the fastest growing county, but I know we're right there neck and neck. And I believe Georgetown just passed Richmond and is now the 6th largest city
Yes, sir.
In Kentucky. So sorry about that, Representative Fraser Gordon. Everybody's moving to Georgetown. What can I say? It's crazy. We've even got a Smoothie King now. I mean, we are really on top of it.
And a Skyline Chili.
And a Skyline Chili. And a Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
So, which, apparently for those who drink coffee is a big thing. So I wondered if you could comment. I'm concerned that our fiscal court's going to have more money than they know what to do with unless I can convince them to cut taxes.
Well, with all due respect, Senator, I don't have anything to do with the property taxes. We just do the occupational license tax. And frankly, when I make those disbursements twice a month, what they do with the money after that is also not, I'm not in my lane there in speaking to that. So I really am not in a position.
I know, but I like to get things on the record here publicly.
Well, let me get this on the record. Thank you, because without you, I wouldn't have a job right now. I did not know that.
Well, I'm all about job creation, Scott. So
Yes.
thank you so much for the great job that you do. I know with the growth we're seeing and all the new businesses coming in, it's put an even bigger burden on you and your team, and you're doing a great job. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Thank you very much. I actually have had a question from the city of Covington, which is not in my district, but it is at the top of the state. And it's around the issue with reliable high-speed internet, telecommuting, hot desking, working from home, and a lot of them aren't ever coming back. Are there clear jurisdictional boundaries in current statute that addresses who collects these taxes? And that's both in-state and interstate, because one of their issues was interstate collection of taxes on that. So are you having jurisdictional issues because I'm telecommuting from home and I might never come into the office, or I might come in once a week or twice a week and hot desk with other employees?
Want to take that, or you want me? I'll take it.
Well, I'll add to what Scott says. Scott says. We had one example in Crestview Hills I'll share after.
Okay. In general, last year legislation was passed so that we could share information on these employee refunds because what happens is with COVID, the employers kept withholding as if they were still in your jurisdiction because nobody knew where this was going. And then they file a refund with us. And I'm the person that processes these refunds in Georgetown. So I see all of them. My signature is one of the signatures on the checks that go out to these folks. But in 2021, we had a bill passed where we could share that information within jurisdictions. So that if I get a refund and someone says I spent half of my time in Lexington, I can share that information with Lexington or Covington, and they can pursue that if they choose to. Now that we're past COVID, it appears that what's happening is it's kind of cemented in a lot of cases. So some companies are offering people to work 2 or 3 days a week from home. As far as occupational license, and let me go a little bit further with that. So that means that the employer should be withholding properly. If they know that they're going to be, they should be 2 days in Covington, 3 days in Boone County or wherever they live. Are there clear jurisdictional lines? Yes. An occupational license tax has always been based on where the work is performed. So if a company in your jurisdiction sends everybody home and home is not in your jurisdiction, you've got a problem. Now, I can tell you, I analyzed this for my commissioners in Georgetown, and there was an impact. We did have some people, because the growth that Senator Thayer talks about, 60% of the growth that we have enjoyed there is people moving there, but 60% of them aren't working there. They're working in Lexington or Frankfurt or someplace else. So we weren't getting the occupational license tax on that. But now, maybe those tables have turned. This year will be very interesting when I look at the 2023 fiscal year and give it to the commissioners. What I told them last year was there was an impact. It was under $200,000 between the city and the county of people working outside of the community. I suspected all along it would not be as much of an issue for us in Georgetown because you cannot build a Toyota Camry in your dining room in Nicholasville. You have to come to Georgetown. So we've got that going for us. But that doesn't mean some of the engineers, the North American Engineering Headquarters is also in Toyota in Georgetown. They travel a lot, and now a lot of them are working from home as well. So there is an impact, but for us, it has been minimal. But occupational tax is what it is, and that's based on where the work is performed.
Okay, we've got several more. If you don't mind, Senator Williams, maybe catch y'all afterwards. Senator McDaniels. And please, we are under a time crunch.
All right, I'll be very, very brief then, Mr. Chairman. I have one quick, actually it's praise to you because I think it's been a tremendously helpful agenda today. A lot of times we deal with the theoreticals of government in Frankfurt and not a lot of the wrench turning and the machinations that actually make it happen. And so this has been really enlightening, I think, on all the levels. I wish the folks from DOI and DOR were here to kind of take the compliment as well. But thank you for a good agenda today was first. Second, welcome to Larry Klein, who was a masterful city manager in Covington through some significant ups and downs that city saw and rode him through all of them. So I just wanted to say that welcome to Larry as well. And then by way of question, if we do have jurisdictions who are raising concerns about occupational licenses and collections and stuff, is potentially looking at a state level centralized collection a better model in the 21st century?
No. We think that for the same reason you would not think it was a good idea for the IRS to come in and take over collection of state taxes, because you know best at the state level how to collect your funds, you know how to disperse it. That's basically our approach at COLA too. It's the same way at the local level. Larry mentioned some of the collaborative relationships we have. We're able to expedite things for businesses many times because we have relationships with planning and zoning, Chamber of Commerce, the building and codes permits. We all work together in community with a lot of partnerships. A lot of that is lost. I can see where there would be some efficiencies, but we would lose local control. We would lose control and have concerns about cash flow and things of that nature. So unless Larry wants to add anything to it, I think our position pretty firmly would be no as far as doing that at the statewide level.
Right.
Because at the local level, we know best just as you know best at the state level how to do that, and an outside entity should not be the one collecting that.
Scott stated some great reasons, and we could give you reasons all day long, but over the years, we've heard this argument many times, but I think the best argument I've ever heard is, if I'm a small local business owner in Crestview Hills and I have a problem with my occupational tax, do I want to call the city or county, or do I want to call Frankfurt? I want to deal with the people whose faces and names I know. And our small businesses are the backbone of our state and national economy. So I think that local, dealing with local people who know you, who know your business, that's critically important, maintaining it rather than calling some 1-800 number in Frankfurt or whoever and talking to someone that you don't know and doesn't know you or your business or how important your business is to that community. We can treat our businesses with great care and kid gloves in our own community because they are important to our community for what they provide to our citizens and for the taxes they pay.
Very well. Thank you both very much for being
Thank
here.
you, Senator.
Do
Thank
appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bledsoe.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief as well. I'm sorry I can't see you both, but thank you for your presentation. Lexington's grateful for the sharing of information. It makes a big difference, giving the regional hub and how much people come into. Over 52% of our workforce comes in every day to Fayette County and out, and so more people are doing remote working. Yeah. I was just curious. I was at a seminar recently talking about remote working and occupational tax, specifically New York's legislation that has required that if they're headquartered in New York and you spend 1 hour a year, the entire remittance of that year goes to New York. And so I was just curious if COLA is following national policies and state trends on those issues.
No, we follow whatever the existing law is, KRS, and then our local ordinances. So if somebody, for example, I mentioned the Toyota engineers. So if they're working, they're based in Georgetown, but they may go to Canada, they may go to Mexico. The company, if it's a one-off, they're never going to keep up with that. If they're working from home 2 or 3 days a week, that's a different story. So the company will typically withhold based on as they spent all their time in Georgetown. When they get their W-2 and they're doing their federal and state income tax returns, they also send a return to me. And that time that they're outside of the jurisdiction, we give them a refund. But if where they're working in Canada, I'm not going to send anything to Canada or Mexico. I don't know what or even other states. But my fellow partners in the Commonwealth, yes, I'll send it to those cities and those counties, and they can do with that data whatever they choose.
Okay, and I appreciate that. That's what I assume.
Yeah.
I guess my greater point is other states are taking policy efforts that impacts us. If there's someone who lives in Lexington who works for a New York-based company and they're in sales or marketing or whatever else, and they are right now paying Lexington fees and occupational tax, but go to New York once in that year, that whole year's remittance is going to be to New York. That does have an impact on us. And I guess that's my heads up to the committee is we're going to have to take a look at what states are doing and how it impacts us.
Absolutely.
That's all. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, ma'am.
We appreciate your presentation. We are a little behind schedule. I'm going to ask for our next presenters to come up. I'm going to, both KCO and KLC are going to testify in this hour and then in the next. So I'm going to reverse orders on the next one. But first, Jim Henderson with KCO, if you could come forward and.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you don't know, we are under a time
Absolutely.
constraint.
Yeah. Got to stay ready here in this committee. Move the agenda, so that's great. Let me get the slide up here. Let's see. There we go. Well, good morning. Good morning, Chairman Bridges, Lieutenant Governor, Chairman Mills. Congratulations. That's a high honor for anybody to be considered as a Lieutenant Governor candidate, so congratulations. I know you've had a busy last few days. So, Senator Elkins, it's great to have a member of this committee that is a former fiscal court member and understands county government very well, so it's great to have you here. Thanks for having us meet here today. We're kind of spread around. There's several committees today, as you earlier mentioned. We appreciate the opportunity to tell the county story whenever we get the chance. Chairman Bridges, you asked me to focus on county government revenues and the major expenditures of county government. My colleague, Todd Ruckel, the head of the Judges Association, and Judge Matt Wireman are going to talk a little bit more about the county budgeting process. Earlier, the testimony from COLA, Department of Insurance, DOR, all covered a lot of the topics that affect both counties and cities. I'll try to point out a little bit of the differences with respect to revenue and expenditures. I do think sometimes people assume both the counties and cities have all the same of both, and we do have some differences that'll be obvious here probably after mine and JD's testimony. I do want to focus on statewide numbers. Mostly, I will drill down some onto county-specific numbers where it makes sense. But let's first, there we go, talk about the total county revenues, again, statewide. So most of my data here is pulled from the fourth quarter financials that are reported to the Department for Local Government by counties. So the most recent ones are not all in yet and easy to access from fiscal year 23. So everything I've got is from fiscal year 22. And again, I usually apologize and qualify this every time, and I just almost have to. But most of our information excludes Jefferson and Fayette because the numbers are so big and the entities are so different that it would really skew the totals too. So again, these numbers exclude Jefferson and Fayette in terms of the totals. So across Kentucky in fiscal year 22 year ending, there were $2.2 billion in county revenues reported across 118 counties. That's a pretty big number. I honestly, in preparing for this testimony, that kind of hit me like, wow, that's a big number. And so I should say that in this particular fiscal year, as you all know, there was a lot of federal dollars that came into counties. So about $328 million of that $2.2 billion is the second round of ARPA funding. So again, that skews it just a little bit. But you want to notice on this particular slide here, I think something interesting is that when you look at the source of revenues for counties, we're very dependent upon state and federal dollars for the operations. And I think that has a lot to do with the distinction of counties being constitutional creatures, political subdivisions of the state, and having state mandated functions as a part of what we do at the county level. So we're very, very reliant on that relationship with the state. But the federal dollars even that counties get are most often still filtered through the state, somewhat state controlled. But again, in terms of source of revenue, again, a little over 56% of that is from, 44% state and federal, 56% of that county. Let me click there. Okay. And so you heard the earlier conversation about the three big taxes. Those are the three significant tax sources for counties. And so 88% of all county tax revenues generated come from these big three. Now, there are a number of counties that don't have all three. Some don't have two of the three. Everybody, of course, has property tax. And so I'll point out some of those distinctions here just in a second. But going into that, I think it's important to see which counties do have these particular taxes. There are 84 counties that have occupational license fee or payroll tax, as the COLA folks were talking. You can just see those counties there. And then 47 counties that have an insurance premium tax. And as the gentleman mentioned earlier, in most of those counties, all but 9, and I know there's another task force about annexation and city-county revenue issues, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that in the insurance premium tax jurisdiction specifically, again, as the gentleman mentioned earlier, in all but 9, primarily the insurance premium taxes that the counties levy can't be collected in the city the way that the law is today because of the offsets. And again, as you all know from previous testimony, in counties over 30,000, except with a few examples like Scott County and Georgetown that was mentioned earlier, there's also a credit or offset in those counties on occupational tax. So again, on county tax revenue, again, you can see on this slide here. Now, this is just in the tax revenue portion. 88% of all tax revenue at the county level comes from payroll, property, or insurance premium tax. And here's the breakdown of the three statewide. Representative Meredith, I know we've looked at some of these numbers over and over the past few years in the conversation about other ways that maybe counties and cities could tax with a change in the Constitution. But the payroll tax, as was earlier said, does represent the largest portion of tax revenue collected at the county level, 44%, nearly $373 million. Property tax revenue just behind it at 34% of all the taxes collected at the county level, $290 million, and then insurance premium tax just under 10% at nearly $80 million. And as I said, if you look at these numbers statewide, you would assume this is kind of similar in every county, but with counties that don't have some of these, or you have some outlier counties, you should know that some of these are way more significant within that county. For example, on the low side in payroll tax, Davis County only has about 10.6% of their total revenues that come from payroll tax. In large part, that's because of their offset issue being over $30,000. Same thing with Warren County, 13.5% of their total revenues come from payroll tax. Flip side, Hancock County, Senator Mills, not too far away there, a small county on the river, big employer there, 87% of its county tax revenues come from occupational tax, primarily from a large employer there, and much the same in Carroll County, with 82% of their budget dependent upon occupational tax. So huge swings on the dependency. Property tax, same thing, almost the flip, if you would assume. Carroll County, 3.9% of its total taxes come from property taxes. So again, it's obviously because they have such a high reliance on payroll tax. And again, Hancock County is the low on that at 5.2%. On the high, Hardin County, 70.8% of its entire taxes comes from property tax. They don't have a payroll tax or an insurance premium tax. Neither does Christian County, with 68% of its total budget coming from property tax. So again, you see these big swings. So when you see these statewide numbers, you talk about the percent of the budget for counties, it's really important to know that in particular counties, it's a huge number both ways. So I just wouldn't want that to get lost. On the other taxes, the 12% or so that's levied from other sources, that's about $100 million statewide. Some examples of that might be things that you all would know. 911 surcharge fees, 911 taxes that are levied on the landlines, the landline telephones. Still a significant number statewide, $22.5 million. That's a restricted fund, as you all would assume, that can only be used for that. That's the portion that's collected at the county level. That does not include what's collected at the state on cell phones that goes into the CMRS board and then is redistributed out to the 911 centers. Real estate transfer tax is another one of those other taxes that exist at the county level. Chairman Bridges and realtors around the room understand that tax. It's about $20.8 million statewide. The bank franchise tax is another significant one. There's been conversation about that in recent years, and just so you know, that's a pretty significant tax revenue for counties, $17.6 million. The hotel motel tax, you hear people in that industry talk about that tax, not being a tax on people locally. It's paid on people who travel, maybe people that are in the state going from places to places, but that tax is paid and remitted to the county, but it has to go directly to the Tourism Commission, and again is restricted.
Jim, I'm gonna have to speed you up there.
I'm sorry. I thought I was hitting.
And as a
10
note,
minutes.
when we start up with questions, I'll ask JD to come up while we're taking questions to Jim. Thank
Good.
you.
So I still got a little bit of time, you said, or I need to. Okay. So let's do slide 7 real quick. So there's where we spend our money at the county level. That's easy. You can see it all there on one slide. Largest expenditures in county budgets, not surprisingly, jails and roads. Those are the two largest budget items within any county budget as a rule. Total jail.
Hey, Jim.
Yep.
We're going to cover that the next hour. The expenditures.
Perfect. Okay, doke. I'm good.
We'll JD, if you'll come up and we'll
Then
open
I
this
am
up
good.
to Jim for questions if anyone has a question.
That was a fast 10 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't believe we do. We'll have you back up.
Perfect.
And J.D. Cheney with KLC, welcome to the table. And
Thank you. Yep, absolutely. You may more text that in there. I'm sorry.
Let's see, slideshow. All right. Well, I'm going to try to follow the instructions, Mr. Chairman. I'll introduce myself, J.D. Cheney. I'm the Executive Director, CEO of the League of Cities. Looks like maybe we lost some font issues there, Mark, with the PowerPoint, but that's okay. The bulk of my time when it comes to revenues, I believe the committee requested that we spend most of our time talking about everything else besides property, insurance premium, and occupational taxes. But just to highlight for Kentucky cities overall statewide, those three types of taxes that were presented on by the Department of Revenue, Department of Insurance, and COLA, that is the primary method by which city governments are funded from a general fund perspective. From a city perspective, 59% of general fund tax revenues come from occupational taxes based on their uniform financial reporting information. 25% of municipal revenues are based on the property tax, and 14% is based on the insurance premium tax. Other two types of taxes that can be levied account for 2%. They're tourism related, transient room tax, hotel motel tax, and the restaurant tax in a select number of cities. Otherwise, everything else is a user fee or a generally dedicated fund. So those are the three most common revenue options to fund general government. There are a number of other fees, and that's what I want to talk about here. Several cities collect alcohol beverage, a regulatory fee that's available in certain cities and certain counties, the hotel tax, the restaurant tax, which is only available in a limited number of jurisdictions that were previously classified as 4th and 5th class cities. Of course, we did a decade ago did away with our classifications, so certain cities can do that. That's subject to litigation right now in Franklin Circuit Court. We had a county government and a city government decide if they couldn't have it, nobody could have it. So it looks like we're going to challenge the whole constitutionality in circuit court on the restaurant tax. And franchise user fees are the other common. We've said this a million times. Some of you are new to the committee. Our Constitution limits the types of revenues that local governments can collect, cities can collect. Section 181 of the Kentucky Constitution is not just a restriction on city governments, but it is a restriction on this legislature. It restricts what the legislature can authorize cities to do. We usually beat the table of home rule, let local control. When it comes to tax setting, that is clearly within the purview of the General Assembly, even at the local level. The General Assembly, we do not have home rule when it comes to local taxation. The General Assembly can only authorize cities to collect occupational taxes. Insurance premium tax is a type of occupational tax. The net profits, gross receipts, and the payroll tax, occupational taxes that was talked about, ad valorem taxes on real and personal property, and franchise fees. Those are the only three things that you all can authorize us to collect in terms of a revenue option, and that's limited on a 1891 constitutional document. If you look at the collections, 2.2 billion and some change, 43 million. The top three taxes account for that for general fund. When you look across this in fiscal year 2021, we're using fiscal year 2021 data because we have certainty that that's the most complete with regard to the revenue options. As we mentioned before, cities can also collect bank deposit franchise fees, like the counties mentioned, the alcoholic beverage licenses and regulatory fees, hotel transient room tax, dedicated though, that is dedicated to funding tourism within the jurisdiction, restaurant tax, and then the franchise fees, which is for the privilege of using the rights of way within a municipal government, whether that's electric utilities, natural gas utilities, water, wastewater, and others. Those bring in relatively less revenue compared to the top three, and they're usually dedicated to how they are used. Here's the statewide examples. If you look, the bank deposit franchise fees, about $25 million was collected for city governments or by city governments in fiscal year 21. ABC licenses and regulatory fee, about $21 million. Hotel transit room tax, you may say, whoa, that $6 million doesn't make a lot of sense. We didn't have that many cities report on collection. That is because a number of jurisdictions have their tourism commissions collect or their joint city-county agencies. So these are the cities that collected directly and sent that to the Tourism Commission. Restaurant taxes accounted for about $28 million in revenues for city government. Again, that's a dedicated revenue source for funding tourism activities, only in those jurisdictions that are authorized based on the previous classification system. And then franchise fees for the privilege of using rights of way within the jurisdictions accounted for $72 million, right around in there, in fiscal year 2021. Here's the breakdown of franchise fees. Electric, $37 million. You can see natural gas, water, wastewater, other franchise fees in terms of what was reported and how that breaks down for municipal governments. Other sources of revenue for cities include intergovernmental transfers. We get money from the state where there is an ability to revenue share, even though Section 181 of the Constitution is limited on that, if the state share is for a statewide purpose. So you look at municipal road aid, the law enforcement citation fee, federal and state grants. You may account for the ARPA money, the CARES money that comes through that process. We put those under intergovernmental transfers. The law enforcement citation fee was created back in 2004. That's actually the first bill I lobbied, was to replace what they call base court revenue, where we used to have local courts, and when they did away with that in '76, this law enforcement citation fee replaced base court revenue resources for city governments. And the municipal road aid fund is one that we've talked quite a bit about needing to get fixed. I'll just give you a few examples from the city perspective. If we're highlighting inequities today, the state collected $773 million in gas taxes. $342 million of that shared with local governments. Cities got $49 million of that. Counties got $125.7 million. And then 167 went to rural and secondary roads. So it's about a 27-73 split between city and county governments with regard to the way local municipal road aid is going. It comes out to about $20.99 per capita for city residents and about $66.77 per capita for county residents, even though you've got the same road use. So $49 million coming to cities with the municipal road aid fund. We spent $310 million. So about 80% or better of road and street maintenance comes out of city general funds rather than that revenue sharing. We also collect, I'm nervous about mentioning this one, parking, Leader Thayer, parking fees, parks and recreation fees for rental and other things like that, other permits, licensure, transit systems that we operate, investment earnings, those generate revenue, and utility operations, which is a whole other enterprise operation and accounted for separately. You can look at this, about $13 million. Those are user fees for the privilege of either metered parking, using city-run parking garages, or other types of parking lots or other parking fees. Parks and recreations generated about $40 million statewide with cities. Other permits and licensures, which would be animal control, building, electrical inspectors, plumbings, development impact fees, other types of local fees. Again, user fees dedicated to funding that specific service. Kentucky law says that your user fees can only be calculated in an amount to generate the cost of providing the service. So these are not revenue generators for the purpose of funding other types of operation, but they're collected in order to fund the service that's being utilized. 19 million on investment earnings. You all back a few years ago expanded our investment options. That's been productive with that legislation that passed, about 19 million on investment earnings. You look at utility operations, water, sewer, electric, natural gas, telecommunications. That, in terms of revenue, in order to provide those services, again, cities can't take utility operations to fund general operations. That has to be used to pay the debt service on our city utilities, to operate the utilities, or pay the debt service on that, or other operational costs. That does not go into the general fund of municipal governments at all. I think, Chairman, given a brief overview, even though we'd like to talk about the top three because those are the most important, those are the other ones, and I stop there, and I think we come back, and I'm supposed to cover the budgetary process for cities at some point. Is that correct?
Do we have any questions? Senator Nemus.
Yes, JD, thank you for your succinct and quick and talking quickly. On the home rule, I know there's different cities and different taxing, so I call that home rule. So what I'd like to call it is home rule with oversight.
That's a good description. The General Assembly, Senator Nemus, that's a fair point, because the General Assembly has, over the years, by statute, not constitutionally, granted a lot of latitude. And that's by statute, not guaranteed in the Constitution. So you've set up the parameters of how we do an insurance premium tax, how we do an occupational tax. House Bill 44, that's a statutory creation with how we level property taxes. So even though the General Assembly has done so, provided a lot of latitude, at the end of the day, what the General Assembly giveth, the General Assembly can taketh away. So that's why you see us up here all the time talking about that. But that's a great description, because you all have afforded us great latitude statutorily.
Any other questions? With that, we're going to take about a 2-minute break, and then we'll come back in and we'll start off with the county budget preparations with the Judge Executive Association and DLJ. So we'll be back here in about 2 minutes.
I did have a question. I just didn't want to ask because I was so late. And I apologize for that.
Local jurisdiction that you're talking about. If you're talking about contributing to the, it depends on jurisdiction. Jefferson County donate or state with regard to state expenditures.
How much?
From a city perspective, they can collect all the revenue. They stack their occupational taxes. That's a locally collected level.
How much should we give to the state?
So state revenue.
My constituents are giving to them.
You want to know, based on state tax collections, where that originates from, how that's spent back. State tax. We may be able to figure it. See, I don't have the data from the local. Maintain the data for state tax collection. That's a Department of Revenue. It's the income tax, the sales tax. All of that is a state tax that's collected and then through the appropriations process. You all decide how to prioritize it.
Is it just us two?
From a state, I can find out where the best place to do it. Whether that's Department of Revenue, I know I don't have that because it's all state collected taxes and how. And
Well, they're not going to give me that because it doesn't look good on them. But I need to know.
You'll find out where to point you.
Thank you.
we're going to come back into the meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to the Judge Executive Association, Todd Ruckle and Matt Wireman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Todd Ruckle, Executive Director, County Judge Association. I'll let Judge Wireman introduce himself real quick.
Yeah, Matt Wire, McGoffin County Judge Executive. And you may ask what McGoffin County Judge Executive is going to be here for, how I got selected. I'm a lifelong accountant and budget person, having spent 3 years in the United States Army as a finance specialist and over 22 years as a school finance officer. So budgets and accounting is what I do.
Okay, and I apologize for running a little long, so whatever you can do to make this as precise as possible and concise, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Chairman Bridges, Chairman Mills, and committee members for the opportunity to run down through the county budget. We'll try to be really brief, but Department of Local Government takes 3 hours to go over county budgets. We're going to try to do that in about 10 minutes, so just bear with us. But being a former mayor and county judge, we put together a few budgets, so I'll try to be very brief, though. First thing I want to show you on your screen there, this is kind of some numbers to look at for county budget-wise. Number of counties that's less than 10 million. There, 52, 10 to 20 million is 37, 20 to 40, 21 counties, and more than 40s, you got 10 counties. Now, the median county budget's 11.1, but that excludes Jefferson Fayette because it skews the number so much. So I'll get into the county budget prep, and I'm just going to kind of run down through the timeline and then turn it over to Judge Wireman to kind of cover, what he goes through as far as the county budget, putting it together. But as you can see there, we approved the sheriff and county clerk budgets by January 15th. Each of these could have a budgeted receipt that is obligated to the county budget. So when the fiscal court takes into consideration, they have to take that into consideration. I think it's line 4 and line 11 on those respectively. And then in February, the county judge executive and the county treasurer, finance officer will attend those budget workshops hosted by DLG. And they'll start compiling the budget information in February. In March, the county judge executive, county treasurer, and jailer, by statute, will prepare the jail budget that will be submitted to the fiscal court by April 1st. By May the 1st, the entire county budget must be submitted to the fiscal court, and they must advertise for the local government economic assistance funds and the county road aid proposed use hearings. They have to advertise for those. By June 1st, by June 1st, the fiscal court will meet to consider proposed budget ordinance and make a detailed investigation of each of those activities for which the county funds are to be expanded. Also, they will at this point hold those LGEA and CRA proposed hearings. They'll have the first reading of the budget ordinance, and the county judge will then make the changes to the budget as directed by the fiscal court members. This is all done by June 1st. Then it will be forwarded to the state local finance officer at DLG to be approved as to form and classification and returned to the county. The county then will advertise for the second reading and publish a summary of the budget. A copy will be posted near the front door of the courthouse at least 7 days prior to adoption of the county budget. The second reading and adoption of the budget must be done by July 1st. Then we publish the budget ordinance and forward a copy to the state local finance officer within 15 days following adoption. It's a quick rundown of the timeline. As you can see, January through July 1, we have to do the entire budget, and then the budget will take place there starting July 1. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judge Wireman to run down through his budget.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's trying to teach accounting in about 5 minutes is not going to go over very well, but I'm going to do the best I can do. And generally, what I'm going to do is just say that the summary of all of our funds you see on the screen there. This is pretty uniform all across the state. We may have some there that other counties don't. They may have some that we don't. But you can see our primary fund is our general fund, which is the only discretionary fund that we have in our budget. You can see mine's at $3.1 million. That's a $600,000 increase this year because we decided, the sheriff and I and the fiscal court, to fee pool. The new sheriff coming in struggles. On day one, he's got 0. and he's been struggling for the past couple of months trying to make payroll and to do the things that he needs to do to enforce the law in our community. And we've decided to start fee pooling, so that increased our budget pretty significantly. You see our road fund. The road fund is $2.3 million, but for McGoffin County, only about 1.3 of that is coming from state funds. The remainder of that is either federal or transfers in from our general fund. And the reason we do that, we have to account and book all those things that we get throughout the year above and beyond. As a county government, if we're trying to maintain our roads, and in McGoffin County, I've got over 900 county roads that stretch over 300 miles. My county rural aid and truck license fee is about $1.3 million. My 14 staff members that I have cost me over $600,000. So that leaves a little over $600,000 to try to maintain those roads. And we've seen an increase in our fuel cost over the past 2 years, go from $120,000 to over $250,000 a year. We also see our materials costs going up significantly. Tiles and to replace bridges has went up significantly. And as you know, in eastern Kentucky, we've seen massive amounts of rainfall. McGoffin County was one of those counties that was hit with the floods last summer, but we were fortunate in a sense that it only got the southern end of my county. Had the rain line went another 10 miles north, I would have been right there with Knott and Perry and Breathitt counties as far as damage. But I'm still trying to recover in it, and you see that reflected in there because of the FEMA dollars we've had to budget from the year before that in 21 flooding. You see our jail fund. Our jail fund, McGoffin County is one of those that have a regional jail. I only get about a little over $80,000 in state funding. That $500,000 that's going into that is a transfer out of my general fund. So my local taxes is paying for the jail cost. That includes those arrested by the state police, the county, and the cities. Our LGA fund is our co-severance fund. McGoffin County is one of those that's been fortunate to reap the benefits of the co-severance tax. But we fell off as far as a producer in the past couple of years. So all we're getting is single line item. And what you're seeing there is projects that we plan to do in the upcoming year. Our next fund is a solid waste fund. That's primarily state grants that we get to do litter abatement and those kind of things. But we also offer a recycling program, which is a money loser. We are getting 40,000 pounds of recyclable materials and getting reimbursement about $1,300. So I'm losing about 50, 60 grand a year there. And with all the remaining taxes till you get down, or budgetary amounts till you get down to 911, you see that is our local tax for 911. Again, that is another one that we are struggling just to maintain and get staff. My staff are working 60 to 75 hours a week, my dispatchers are, because we can't find people willing to do the job for what we can afford to pay. We are seeing a lot of things going on with this economy and with inflation, and it's just not in McGoffin County, whether it's McGoffin County, Eastern Kentucky, or Carlisle County in Western Kentucky. This is a problem all across the state. I had a staff member come in Friday saying, "Judge, I love you, but I'm going to have to find something else." He's making $13 an hour. I said, "Well, you realize that with your benefits, you're making over $50,000 a year." But he said, "That's not money in my pocket. It's not feeding my family." When we have a finite amount of money that we raise and that we have to spend annually, and we have constraints on revenue growth, I don't know what counties and cities are going to do to maintain and keep quality staff. I know I could go into a lot more being an accountant and a bean counter. I could sit here and bore you to tears and talk right down to the bare minimums. But I just wanted to go over and just cover the different types of funds and some of the things that we're seeing in just a matter of minutes out here in our rural communities. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? I do want to share this. We do appreciate you, and the purpose of this meeting is just to get everyone in front of you so they know your face. They can make the phone calls for follow-up questions and everything. So with that, we'll move on to J.D. Cheney will be up with the city budget preparation.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you.
Well, at least, Mr. Chairman, we're getting the exercise today, and I need it. You can tell that. But let's see. There's KLC. We're back. Had it right there where it needed to be, and I messed it up, didn't I? There's a budgetary process. So you ask us to generally outline, which is a little bit different than the state process, obviously, and the county process on how cities go about adopting their budget. We get to do this every couple of years after city elections and educate those newly elected officials on how the budget process works, because most people that go into city office are doing it on a volunteer basis. They're not doing it for the pay. Average pay of mayors in Kentucky is about $6,000 a year, if that tells you. They're not doing it for power, pay, prestige, fortune, or fame. So we got our dental hygienists and our school bus drivers and our retired lawyers and bankers in there. So we spend quite a bit of time doing educational elements, not just up here at the legislature. I know Chairman Mills went through that when he was on the Mayor Pro Tem in Henderson and educating our city officials. And so this is a snippet and a summary of the 2-hour class that we do on budgeting for city governments, I think in a 10-minute view. The Kentucky Constitution and Kentucky statute require cities to adopt an annual budget by way of an ordinance. So that has to be an ordinance document. That's local legislation, 2 readings on separate days, published in a newspaper or published on an alternative website. City budgets by statute have to cover a fiscal year, just like the state process, July 1 to June 30th. Likewise, under the Kentucky Constitution, our city budgets have to balance. Expenditures in any one fiscal year cannot exceed the revenues in any one fiscal year. If a city government in Kentucky, we do have a safety clause. We don't shut down cities if there's a failure to get the budget adopted. If cities fail to get the budget in place, the ordinance enacted by July 1 in any fiscal year, there's a savings clause under state statute. It's not a constitutional provision, but under state statute, the city has to continue to operate under the previous fiscal year's budget as if it had been readopted. So it would keep a continuation of city government if you had a deadlocked legislative body, if you had an issue with getting it approved. We have a savings clause there to keep it going. The budgetary process begins with the executive authority, and that's going to be different from city to city. I'm looking up here just at the composition of this committee. With Lexington, you have a separate executive authority. In Nicholasville, Representative Lockett, you're run by a city commission with no separate executive authority. And there are, Richmond left, Deanna left, but Richmond has a city manager form of government. So that all depends on how the city government's organized. The vast majority of cities are organized under the mayor-council form of government. There's a separate executive authority. The mayor is the CEO in most cases, in most Kentucky cities, that the mayor is the CEO of the city. And the mayor is responsible for proposing, much like the governor does to you all, proposing a budget to the city legislative body, the council, at least 30 days prior. Now, in practice, getting the proposed budget June 1st for a July 1 budget doesn't really work. In most cases, this is done in March or April, where the executive authority will make the proposed budget and include a budget message that has a description of all the governmental goals that are fixed by the budget, the important features of the budget, the statement of the reason for any changes from the previous fiscal year's budget, and all of that, much like the governor's budget address to the legislature every 2 years when the governor proposes a budget. So proposed budget document, message can be written, delivered orally, and generally that's in April, but it has to be done 30 days prior to July 1. Once the legislative body, the commission, board of commissioners, or the council gets that proposed budget, then they can do whatever they want to do with it. Just like the General Assembly can do that to a governor's budget. If you want to wad it up and throw it in the trash, then the council can do that. It's up to the council at the end of the day. I know Representative Chester Burton went through that process as mayor of Shively, where she proposed the budget, and the council came in. Not that they threw your proposed budget away; they took her proposed budget in its full form. But the budget ordinance has to have 2 readings, published in the newspaper. We talk about that another day about newspaper publication, but the budget ordinance can be amended at any time. So unlike the General Assembly, when you all enact the state budget and you adjourn sine die, Where's your amendment process? You all can't come back together and amend that budget unless you're called into a special session. City legislative bodies continue to go, so by ordinance, they can enact an ordinance at any point in time and amend the budget ordinance if they need to. City budgets run the gamut, as you may imagine. 414 cities now, I think, remaining in Kentucky. We had one dissolve, according to DLG, a couple weeks ago, that they dissolved under Chairman Mills's bill. 414 cities. Some of them are tediously line item, where they'll go through and legislative bodies will want to manage the number of paper clips. And others are broad, departmental, having the police department, but it has to be by fund type, but the city legislative body can design that process however they want to and be as specific or as broad as they want to. Once that's adopted, much like what you're familiar with from the state level agency, the administration of the budget goes back to the executive authority. And the executive authority has to operate within the ordinance, budget ordinance adopted by the city. And that's the mayor in the mayor council form of government. Under the city manager form of government, that's a city manager, does that administratively. If you're in a commission form of government like Nicholasville, hopefully you have a city administrator. If not, all 5 members of the commission are responsible for meeting and administering the budget. The executive authority has to provide ongoing updates to the legislative body. Legislative body makes the appropriations decisions. They control the checkbook. Even though the executive authority is administering that, the legislative body has to come back, or the executive authority has to come back at least quarterly and provide a statement of the budgetary comparisons for each fund adopted in the budget at least once every year. Some cities demand that every month on a monthly basis if they're smaller. And then state law addresses how we have to account for that. Accounting system that cities use has to conform to state law, all these state law requirements we're talking about, and GASB. GASB standards, we have to do GASB accounting. So that means all these new GASB rules that come up, we do not do statutory accounting basis. The statute says we are to use GASB in our process. City funds can only be spent in accordance with what was in the budget ordinance. If the mayor goes out and makes a contract outside that budget ordinance or makes any kind of expenditure of any city employee outside of that, then guess what? The contract's voidable, not voidable, the contract's void, and it's recoverable personally. This is one of the few times where you see city officials with personal liability exposure on making expenditures outside of the budget ordinance. Likewise, a tax imposed and collected and spent on something other than the purpose that it's specified for is also recoverable. So contracts can be voided, employee can be held personal liability. So there's a strong incentive for the budget administrator, the executive authority, to follow the ordinance precisely. And that's why you see a lot of cities amend their budgets frequently, especially those that get really line itemed. Councils get excited about this is a good way to control the mayor, is to be really, let's tell them how many paper clips they can have. They get really excited about that. But then when they're having to have special meetings 3 or 4 times to amend the budget ordinance because they were so specific, it gets to be an irritant. So most cities kind of meet in the middle where there is not a ton of line item budgeted. There's no line item veto for the executive authority in the process at all. It's either approve the whole budget ordinance or veto the whole budget ordinance if you're in the mayor council form of government. But that's generally the process that cities utilize, locally driven. That's the rubric that it goes under. Hopefully I got maybe I went 12 minutes, but that's usually a 2-hour discussion. Any questions about our process?
Well, and we're going to leave you up here to continue the other part too. So
perfect.
I'm trying to save you steps.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
Do we have any questions? You're really good.
All right. Well, let's keep rolling. municipal expenditures. So what's in those budget ordinances? What are cities spending money on? We break things down in our reports into three major municipal expenditure areas: salaries and wages, general operations, capital outlays, and then into functional areas of general government, public safety, public services, community services, and utilities, of course, of being those functional areas. So if we look at cities statewide, based on their reporting, salaries and wages, $1.3 billion. If you look at that, and that does not include fringe benefits or unemployment, so health insurance costs. It does include pension contributions, and other costs are out of that. So that is the most, if you look at what most city government budgets are heavy on, if you look at a broader category across public safety, general government, community services, it's salaries and wages. On average, that's between 70 and 75% of a city's budget is wages, personnel wages, and benefits. Other operations include all other costs: material, supplies, contractual services, miscellaneous costs, $2.1 billion. And then capital outlay, which are for items that are over $1,000 that have 3 years or greater life, $1 billion, looking at it statewide. And then breaking down, we have had some great experience since we separated the county employees' retirement systems from the state retirement systems, but the pension contributions are a huge cost for local governments that participate in CERS. You'll see there for non-hazardous, $142 million, $164 for hazardous. We have several cities that maintain their own, we'll call them legacy pension plans for police and fire. Health insurance, $172 million. Other employment types of benefits, $119 million when you break that down. Now, we have a few examples here as well of across the five functional areas from a few cities. We have Henderson, Paducah, Brownsville, Lexington, Coal Run Village. Senator Wheeler didn't show up, but we put Coal Run in there for him, and then the city of Berea for Representative Bray, to get a few of you all on the committee to kind of have a comparison. You look at Lexington compared to general government wages. Now, general government wages includes city hall expense, elected official expense, public buildings, general insurance coverage, bond insurance costs. Those things are covered under general government. For public safety, that's your EMS, your police, your fire, all of their budget. Public services include basic infrastructure, solid waste activities. That would include streets and roads. As I mentioned before, $310 million spent on city streets coming out of general fund revenue, recycling programs, public parking, river ports, natural resource management. Those types of things fall under the public service category. Community services are less prevalent in a number of Kentucky cities, but those include things like parks and recreation comes out of that, any public transit, public health, if the local governments make any, city governments make any contribution to that, housing. A lot of cities operate housing authorities, would come out of that community services program. So just visually, without going down each number, you can kind of take a look and see how that varies from community to community and what their priorities are. The legislative body in that budgeting process gets to decide whether or not you're going to create the new park, or you're going to create and invest in that in a particular budget year. It's just like except at a more micro level, and I know Senator Mays Bledsoe oversaw this at Lexington. It's just like here, except more on a micro level in terms of those elected leaders, those legislative body members, making decisions on how they're going to spend their funds. So I'll just let you all look at those for purposes of brevity, so you can compare them across and see how different Kentucky cities are in terms of how they raise their revenue and how they spend their revenue. And those are local decisions, are best made at the local level, and those local priorities are set there. I would be happy to answer any questions about the expenditure categories, budgeting process, or otherwise, Mr. Chairman, but if not, I'll conclude.
I don't see any questions, but we do appreciate the time put into this and the educational purposes we're gaining from this knowledge. So we do appreciate you, JD and KLC. If anyone does, I'm sure we feel like we're drinking out of a fire hose, but as we take a few days to churn this around, have questions, I would encourage you to reach out to JD. He's really good at keeping you up to date and keeping you informed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the committee's time.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, you're up next. And we do have a state government committee starting in 15 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
Mills
Well,
has to be.
I apologize. I misunderstood the flow earlier, and I was just trying to get right into the expenditures piece. I was nearly done, so I apologize. The last slide I threw up there, it's only the one slide, and I mentioned it as I was kind of wrapping up, just because that's it. I mean, that's where do counties spend their money, and this little word picture essentially shows scale of the larger the name, the more significant the expenditures are. As I started to say, as I jumped ahead of myself earlier, the two largest areas of expenditures within counties across the state are in our road maintenance and jails. Again, not surprisingly to most of the members of this committee, you've heard us testify many times, long before I was even in this role at CAECO. County officials, county judges have talked about the jail costs. There's a committee going on in another room about jails, a task force to study that. In fiscal year 22, $322 million statewide among counties was expended on jail operations. And as I talked about that match of state, federal, and local generated dollars earlier, there's a heavy dependency with the state, with the county jails on the state, because of the relationship we have on housing state inmates and those per diems. And so a lot of that money comes from the state in that total, but about $125 million is supplemented from the county's tax revenues for the jails. And then the road, I mentioned, the road fund is the largest single fund within a county budget, $355 million. And as JD explained the sources of that earlier with the motor fuels tax and how that's distributed, again, the lion's share of roads and maintenance of roads rests with counties across the state. Over half of the road miles in the state are county maintained roads, and a third of the bridges. So again, not surprisingly that a large amount of money is spent on county roads. When you get outside of those things, other things kind of fall off in terms of their total. The county sheriff and the county clerk, as the previous presentation kind of highlighted, those budgets are kind of tricky. Some counties do blend those budgets with fee pooling, as Judge Wireman was talking about in his county, but most counties don't. So you have a separate budget for the sheriff and the county clerk, where there are dollars that are moving over from the county's general fund, but those two offices are a lot of fees. About $90 million plus does go into our sheriffs and law enforcement roles with the sheriff's office from the general tax revenues. But remember, the sheriff's role is much bigger than law enforcement for the county. The sheriff serves as the chief collector of taxes for all taxing jurisdictions. The sheriff is the person who is responsible for making sure that if you want to have somebody served with papers, that all goes to the sheriff's office. The sheriff's required to provide security for the judicial facility and the judges there. So again, it's broader than law enforcement. In fact, many sheriffs, law enforcement is not the primary responsibility that they have because of the small budgets they have in these small counties. EMS, another big one you maybe heard us talk about before. Not every county is in the EMS business, but where there is no private provider or other option, the county, ultimately that falls to the county to do. And so $54 million statewide spent on EMS. Judge Wireman talked about the huge amount of money in his budget allocated for 911 dispatching. Another $54 million in county budgets to do dispatching across the state. about 18 million in animal control. I probably got more calls about dogs when I was judge than any other issue. So maybe that's where we should spend more money based on the amount of attention you get on a topic, but about 18 million on animal control. Elections, another big one that counties have. Coroner's office, PVA support, county attorneys, fire departments. Most counties don't have a county-wide or paid fire department, but they do provide a lot of support to the rural volunteer fire departments. Chairman Bridges, the list is long, but again, that's just a snapshot of all those expenditures. I'm trying to be brief than normal. So again, I'm happy to answer questions. It has been a fire hose kind of day for your members with information. So happy to answer questions if needed.
And I do not. I think everyone's exhausted. It has been a schedule that's been packed full, but the knowledge is imminent that we be aware of all this, and I appreciate that. Appreciate both KCO and KLC. They have done extra business, and I'm sorry, I think maybe Senator Berg may have a question. You sure? Okay. I'm sure she's got your numbers on speed dial. So we'll follow up with that. But I would encourage any members that, even those that may have tuned in late or whatever, if they have any questions, reach out to all the ones that have spoke today. They're very knowledgeable and can get you up to speed on all the needs that we have throughout local government. With that, one quick announcement. The next meeting of the committee will be August the 24th. At the State Fair. So we look forward to seeing everyone with that. And with that, if I've got a motion to adjourn.
So moved.